Is within the Division of Quality Assurance, and we oversee the Wisconsin Caregiver Law. And the Wisconsin Caregiver Law has a number of components to it, and one component of the Caregiver Law requires that our entities report and investigate and report allegations of misconduct to the division. Our office is responsible for receiving those reports and then reviewing those, screening them, and making a determination if they would be investigated or not. We receive a lot of allegations that our office doesn't have jurisdiction over. We receive allegations related to credentialed caregivers, such as maybe LPNs, RNs, OTs, nursing home administrators. Anybody with a credential, we don't have jurisdiction over in the Office of Caregiver Quality. So we're going to make a referral to the Department of Safety and Professional Services for those folks. We also will make referrals to other agencies, such as the Adult Protective Services or Adult at Risk agencies. We'll make referrals to the Office of Inspector General or the Department of Justice if we feel there's some potential criminal activity that they might be interested in investigating. So anything that our office doesn't have jurisdiction over, we will make a referral. Another component of the Wisconsin Caregiver Law is that we maintain a caregiver misconduct registry. So anybody who has a finding of caregiver misconduct is placed on a registry, and they're no longer allowed to work in our health regulated facilities unless they've gone through the rehabilitation review process. And that video just talked a little bit about what that process is. I tell people that the nurse aid registry is a good thing, but the misconduct registry is a bad thing. And sometimes in talking about the two, it's a little confusing for the fact that the nurse aid registry is the larger umbrella, and within that nurse aid registry is the misconduct registry. So if a person has a name on the misconduct registry, you're going to find them by searching through the nurse aid registry. Another component of the caregiver law is that as employers are required to conduct background checks on any employee that they hire at the time of hire and then every 4 years thereafter, so is the department. So our office is responsible for running background checks on all of our licensees who are looking for licensure or certification, and we do that at the time that they make application with us. And then we're required to do that every 4 years thereafter. We wrapped up a 4-year renewal in 2017, and our office ran over 6,000 background checks on the various entities that we have regulated in the division. As part of that process, we need to look at the results of those background checks, and again, if they have any barring offense, there are limitations that we might put on their license, or again, they may not be able to be licensed at all, just as somebody with a finding on the misconduct registry or a barred offense may not be able to work in one of our entity types. Another component of the Wisconsin Caregiver Law talks about the nurse aid training programs, and that's what we do in our office, and we have approximately 128 approved nurse aid training programs. And the nurse aid training programs they provide training to our individuals who want to be trained as nurse aides to work in our federally funded facilities, such as our nursing homes. And it's 120 hours of training, and then their name is placed on the nurse aid registry as an individual who is eligible to work in our federally funded facilities. We conduct on-site reviews on those training programs at the time of approval and then every 2 years thereafter. We are switching our contract vendor right now. Our department contracts with Pearson VUE. You may be familiar with that name. They provide our testing and registry services for us. Beginning September 1st, we're switching from Pearson VUE to Headmaster. And they will now provide our registry and testing services beginning September 1st. So So I was asked to provide some data regarding allegations that our office received. So I took our data from 2017. In 2017, we received over 6,000 allegations of caregiver misconduct. Now that includes the self-reports that our entities are required to report to us. It also includes complaints of misconduct that we may receive from third-party people, somebody other than an entity that's reporting to us. So I'm going to break that down, and I'm going to talk about that data as it relates to the facility type, as it relates to the complaint by the allegation type, was it abuse, neglect, or misappropriation, the caregiver role, and then we'll review some history from 2007 to 2017. I do have some notes. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything as I go through these. Okay, so out of those over 6,000 complaints that our office received in 2017, this is the breakdown of facility type. You can see that our nursing homes have the largest number of reports made to our office, and that would make sense because CMS requires that our nursing homes report every allegation of caregiver misconduct to our office. So they need to immediately report that allegation to our office, and then they have 5 days to investigate that report and then send us their investigative report, and then we review that as a package. Our other entity types that are not regulated by CMS, they are required to investigate every allegation of caregiver misconduct that they receive. However, they have some discretion to go through and through their investigation determine if it's a reportable incident or not. And we've got some tools out on our web that help our entities do that. So not every allegation of misconduct that's received, let's say in an adult family home or a CBRF, is necessarily reported to us, such as it might be in our nursing homes.
Or
yes?
Could I just, so when these are being reported, is it more being reported by another staff member, or is it family members, or who's?
The majority of the reports are self-reports, and that means that they're reported by the entity themselves, by the facility.
Okay.
However, that's not to say that we don't receive reports from family members or from staff people or from visitors. So we do receive those reports as well.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll be getting to a slide that kind of shows where those complaints have come in from, and that might help answer your question a little bit further.
So since we were, because I was going to ask the question first on, but I didn't know we can ask the question. So when you're talking about the patient care agencies, right, and you talk about self-report with that being an agency, so like I would say that I had an aide that left a totally assist person without cares for 3 days and didn't report in. That would be something that I would self-report to the agency based on this CNA, right? Okay, that's
so if you are assisted living facilities, our CBRFs, adult family homes, our CACs, they make up, you know, probably the next largest bunch of facility types of facility of reports that we receive. So then the complaint by the allegation type. So again, out of the 6,000 reports plus that we've received, this is kind of the breakdown. We take the category of abuse and we break that down into a number of different areas. We have physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, and verbal abuse. However, you can see that if you take all those categories, that's probably our largest reported category is abuse. The second largest would be misappropriation, and that's somebody taking something from somebody that doesn't belong to them. So that's the second largest allegation type that we receive in our office. We receive a lot of injuries of unknown source reports, and again, that relates back to our nursing homes. Our nursing homes are required to report those. If a resident has an injury and they can't determine the origin of that injury and it seems suspicious, then they're required to report that to our office. So that's what that category is. And then we just had a couple of reports that, based on the information we had, we really couldn't determine what area it may have fallen in, abuse or misappropriation or neglect, whatever the case might be. Ryan had just talked quite a bit about, social media and that type of thing. Our office has made a large focus on our allegations related to social media, and we are referring all of those allegations to our Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is looking at those reports for potential criminal charges. And there have been some charges that have come through. There have been a couple of convictions that have come through based on allegations of abuse related to social media. So this slide is a little harder to see, and it's even harder to see on your handout. But if you're a more visual person and you like pies and graphs and charts and all that kind of good stuff, this just shows you the same thing, only in a pie form. So then if we talk about the caregiver role out of those 6,000 reports that our office received last year, what was the role of the individual that was identified in the allegation? You'll see that we have both caregiver and nurse aide up there, and you might ask, what is the difference between those two? So I talked earlier that a nurse aide is somebody who goes through the approved training of 120 hours, and then their name is placed on the nurse aide registry. A caregiver is an individual who has not been trained as a nurse aide. So in our nursing homes, in order to work in our nursing homes and our federally funded hospices, home health agencies, you need to be a nurse aide. In our assisted living facilities, you do not need to be a nurse aide. So those individuals are typically referred to as caregivers. So you can see that a large number of reports are related to our nurse aides because, again, we get a large number of reports from our nursing homes because they're required to report everything. So over 1,500 of those reports had an individual named as a nurse aide. Much smaller numbers for our personal care workers. The SQC, that always kind of doesn't fall out of my mouth real easily, is substandard quality of care. And again, that's related to our nursing home industry. If there's a citation made that falls under that particular category, then again, they need to refer that to our office. And then we make a referral to the Department of Safety and Professional Services for that individual as a credentialed individual. No named caregivers. You can see that we've got over 2,600 allegations that were made that we did not have a named caregiver. That's the majority of our reports. Many times a resident might report, somebody came into my room and took the $20 I had in my drawer. So they can't name anybody through the facility's investigation. They can't name anybody, but again, they still need to report it. So it comes to our office, and then we just put it in that category of no caregiver named. So out of the cases that we received, when we receive a case in our office, we take it through a screening process. And we look at it for a number of different things that I'll talk about in just a minute. But we need to look at it through the eyes of what type of investigatory merit does it have? Does it meet the definition of abuse, neglect, or misappropriation? And if it does, then our office is going to open it for investigation. So out of all of the reports that we received, we opened 361 cases in 2017, and we substantiated 109 of those cases. We have 6 investigators in our office, and then we also subcontract with an organization out of Milwaukee called North Shore Investigations. And between those investigators and our investigators, we substantiated on 109 cases. Now that means that through our investigation, we determined that the allegation of misconduct more likely occurred than not, okay? We don't have to reach any type of criminal burden, anything like that. We just have to determine that it more likely occurred than not. So 109 of those cases were substantiated, and 2 at the time that we put this data together were under appeal. So when a individual has an allegation made against them, our office by law is required to notify that person in writing. So we receive an allegation into our office. If there's a named caregiver, we need to notify Mary Smith that an allegation has been received in our office, and then identify what our office is going to do. We've taken it through the screening process, and we're either not going to open it for investigation, it doesn't fall within our jurisdiction, whatever the case might be, we're going to refer it, or we are going to open it for investigation. Once we do make a finding, then we need to notify that person again in writing, and that person then has the right to appeal. So at the time of this data, when it was collected in 2017, we didn't have the results of those 2 cases that were currently under appeal. Now you might say, well, there was a large number of those cases that weren't substantiated. They weren't substantiated for a number of reasons. Once our investigators went in and gathered additional information, we found that truly they didn't meet the definition of abuse, neglect, or misappropriation. We have to very specifically be able to prove up those elements, that definition of abuse, neglect, or misappropriation in order for a substantiation to be made. So we went in and we looked and we said, well, no, it really doesn't meet that definition. So we unsubbed on 91 cases because of that. We went into facilities, did our investigation, and determined we really didn't have jurisdiction for whatever reason. Perhaps it was an allegation that was not even, the accused wasn't even a caregiver, and we don't have jurisdiction over somebody who's not a caregiver. So 5 cases were not subbed for that. A large number of our cases just could not be verified. You know, we had information that something probably did happen, but we can't gather enough information to prove that something more likely happened than not, okay? And we need to be real careful when we're making those determinations because we're affecting somebody's livelihood. And so, you know, we take that very seriously, and we need to be sure that should a person appeal and it goes before an administrative law judge, that we have enough evidence to prove what we need to prove in order to hold that substantiation up.
Do you guys keep any record, and it's probably a question for you all, for Department of Aging, ADRC, all of them, the people who call, the clients who we know who call and may say that something's going on that's not all the time. Like if the client who calls, say their name is Mary Darling, if Mary Darling is calling weekly, are you guys keeping track of that? How do you handle that? Even though, not saying if Mary Darling calls every week, 53 weeks, 2 of those weeks something could be wrong. But is that an angle? And just speaking of not just for working in the administrative side now, but as I've been in CNA for 20 years, like, can you kind of touch on, or do you like to know, how do you guys handle that when we know that there is a big amount of clients or family members that could call and tell lies? Do you guys kind of look at that? Because like you said before, that's a huge, that you take somebody's livelihood away from them.
Right. So the department has a number of ways by which an individual can file a complaint. They can call our complaint line. They can contact us through our webmail, or they can, you know, send a report directly to our office. It doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while we do get an individual who is very persistent on contacting us with information, and perhaps it's the same information over and over and over again, and they're just not happy with the result, with our response perhaps. You know, maybe we've referred it to the Bureau of Assisted Living for their investigation, or maybe we've referred it elsewhere, or maybe we've contacted them. And so when we get those cases, and again, it's pretty rare, we try our best at the division level to meet that individual's needs and certainly look into the allegations that they're making. But if it gets to be consistent and constant, we have a process in the department where it kind of gets up, it raises to a different level for our response. but it doesn't happen very often. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And then we had 9 cases that were dismissed. And I talked about that when we do make a substantiation, we have to give that person appeal rights, and that goes before an administrative law judge, and they hear all of the evidence. In 9 of our cases, either when we made a substantiation and that appeal went to our Office of Legal Counsel, they looked at our evidence and said, you know, you really didn't meet the definition of whatever the case might be, or you really don't have enough evidence to support this. Or it went to an administrative law judge and they said, no, department, you didn't meet your burden of proof. And so we had 9 cases that were dismissed for those types of reasons. And again, if you're a visual person, a pie-like person, although the picture doesn't do you much good, this is just another way to look at that. So then if we talk about kind of complaint history, and I only went back about 10 or 11 years because we could go back. The caregiver law went into effect in 1998. So I went back to 2007, I'm sorry. And in 2007, our office received a little over 2,000 reports of caregiver misconduct, you can see. In 2010, that more than doubled. And there's a reason for that. In 2010, CMS said, nursing homes, you must report everything to your state agency. So based on that directive from CMS, you can see that our complaints dramatically increase. So, and then in 2017, again, you can see that increase 7 years later. So from 2007 to 2017, we've got a 64% increase in the number of complaints that were received in our office. Now there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, there's a lot more entities out there than there were maybe 10 years ago. People might be more aware to report, that awareness is out there, so we receive more reports. Again, with the CMS directive, they're required to report to us. So there's a number of factors that certainly can contribute to that increase that we see here. So I was asked to talk a little bit about, you know, what does our office see related to the workforce crisis that we have in relation to the amount of complaints that our office might receive. And I don't know that we can make a direct correlation necessarily. I know that we do receive a lot of complaints from family members or from residents, caregivers themselves, saying we don't have enough staff working in our facilities. Residents complaining about delays in care, whatever the case might be. Our department has tried to take a proactive approach to this, to the workforce crisis. And just as our social media awareness campaign was funded by civil money penalties, we most recently got a grant from CMS. It's called the WISC Caregiver Program. Is anybody familiar with that?
Yeah, we actually had Kevin.
Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah,
great.
our last meeting.
Great. So most, if not all of you are familiar with that, so I won't spend a lot of time, but we received funding to allow the department to, our goal is to increase the workforce by 3,000 new nurse aides through paying for their training and their testing. Once an individual has trained and tested, if they are employed in a nursing home for 6 months or more, the nursing homes, participating nursing homes, have agreed to pay them a retention bonus of $500. We've had a lot of people register. People can, they go to our website and they see this program and it looks pretty good, so they go on and they register. And at that point, our office runs a background check on them that we send to them, and then they're able to take that to the training program. And the training program will make a determination. They need to review that to make sure, first of all, that they don't have any barring offenses, or their criminal history is not substantially related to the work that they might be doing in the clinical setting. So we've had a lot of folks register, but a small number of those folks have actually just signed up for training, about a quarter of those that you can see there. So we do have an individual in our office who's dedicated specifically to the WCP in running background checks and processing applications to test. And prior to coming here, I was talking with her, and she indicated that on Friday she received a large number of applications to test, which means that you know, people have gone, they've registered, they've gone through the training, and now they're at the point for testing. So we're seeing an uptake of individuals who are kind of completing the process as far as the testing piece goes. So that's nice. So I was kind of asked to also talk about how does somebody report an allegation to our office and what happens with it when somebody does report. And I touched on a little bit of this already, but Chapter 13 of the Wisconsin Caregiver Law requires that our entities have policies and procedures related to reporting and investigating allegations of caregiver misconduct. So all of our regulated entities are required to have some type of protocol. They need to let the caregivers know, they need to let residents know, they need to let family members know. If I have an allegation or a concern of caregiver misconduct, first of all, who do I report that to? How do I report it? What happens when it's reported? Who investigates it? Those types of things need to be in their policy. So for our nursing homes, I talked about that's a little bit different than what our other entity types might be. And because they need to do that immediate reporting, they have a short little form that they submit to us that just identifies very briefly what that allegation is, the name of their facility, if they know the caregiver name that's being alleged, and then just a brief description of what the allegation might be. Mary Smith swore at me last night when she was providing cares. So they submit that short little form to us as their immediate report. And then the nursing home and all of our other entity types, once they receive an allegation of caregiver misconduct, they need to investigate that. And once they investigate that, and for our non-nursing homes, if they determine that in fact it could be caregiver misconduct, then they need to report that to our office. And they do so by using that form 62447, and they just submit that directly via an email to our intake box. Now, for our non-nursing homes, as our surveyors are out and about and conducting surveys in our non-federally funded facilities, they should be asking the entities, have you received any allegations of caregiver misconduct since our last survey? And those entities, they are required to keep the last 30 allegations that have been reported to them. And it would be highly unlikely that a facility would not have any allegations of misconduct reported to them in that 2-year period of time. There's going to be a situation where a resident or a client has said, you know, somebody was mean to me, or somebody took my money, or somebody did something that might allege caregiver misconduct. And so they need to investigate all of those allegations. But again, if they don't believe it's a reportable incident, they need to save that report. And our surveyors will just review those when they go in at the time of survey. Our nursing homes, yep.
Just ask a question. In the reporting requirements, we have AFHs and CDRFs.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the line in the last year, a program manager has read an interpretation that our AFHs have a higher level of reporting than our CDRFs, that we have to report immediately. By what I mean before an investigation, what I'm hearing now is that's not true. In the last DQA meeting, I asked that question. I had a specific from him because when you read it, it's kind of left up to interpretation. So Otis was going to get me an answer back, but I haven't heard anything. Is there someone we can work with to work through that? Because I feel like we might be over-reporting.
Okay, and I know what you're referring to, because in the adult family home regulations in 88, at the very end of the regulations, it talks about that the entity report, I believe, immediately report to the state agency, to the licensing agency. And did Alfred speak with you at your group? So the other thing that I was asked to cover is some prevention. What can we do to prevent abuse, neglect, and misappropriation in our elderly particularly? And I came across an article by the Social Security Administration that I thought would be helpful that talks about 5 ways to fight elder abuse. And I'm going to let you kind of just pass these around, but I've just summarized it on the slide here. One of the suggestions was to break down isolation. As a community, keep an eye on our elders, keep an eye on our persons that might have some type of disability or some type of need, and advocate for them and look out for them and check on them. Make sure that they don't isolate themselves. Teach that individual to look for red flags. And it talked about a number of red flags in the article. Again, isolation, unpaid bills, those types of things that might not be normal for the individual. Connect with various resources in the community. There are a number of resources. Our ombudsman program, our APS programs, our ADRCs. There are a number of programs within our communities that can help us protect our vulnerable individuals. Watch out for scams and frauds. There's a whole lot of those that go on. I'm on a work group for financial exploitation of elders, and there's a number of members on that work group from bankers and lawyers and department personnel and APS workers. And there's a lot of scams and a lot of fraud out there. I don't know if maybe many of you have heard of the grandma-grandpa scam kind of thing, where an individual might call and they pretend they're an individual's grandson or granddaughter, and they maybe had, they're in a different country and they got arrested for some reason, or they had car trouble and they need some money wired. Several years ago, both my parents were called, and the individual, and my mother being pretty sharp, was even duped. She thought her granddaughter was calling her and was told that they couldn't afford to pay their electric bill. And my mother was, of course, devastated, and Nana, can you send us some money? And so my mom, she wanted to help any way she could, but she said, well, let me see what I can do. Give me your number, Jen, and I'll call you back. Well, at that point, the individual hung up because they're certainly not going to give a number. So let our vulnerable folks know that those things are scams and not to fall for those. We lose millions and millions of dollars to those types of things. And then also encourage those individuals to talk about it. So many of our individuals are ashamed or embarrassed if they feel that they've been scammed or frauded in some way, and encourage them to report that and bring that information forward. For individuals that might be hiring caregivers on their own, check CCAP. Go to the DOJ website, conduct a background check, be sure to get references, call those references. There's a number of things that individuals can do to help protect themselves. So again, this resource, this handout came from the Social Security Administration Daily Bulletin. So any questions on anything that I've talked about? Yes.
It relates to the bonus that some of the nursing homes are helping with for CNAs. Is any programs in the future looking to be helping as far as personal care agencies to help caregivers? Because I'm just thinking we get it too. We get that. I know a lot of people get it that if they're working in a certain area, so if a CNA is working at a nursing home and if she picks up part-time at an agency, they always compare prices. And then they always compare and say this or that. So I'm looking at now if there's a bonus being offered by other people, is that something that, is it only going to always be offered as to nursing home facilities, or will it be other areas as well?
Because the monies from the grant were provided through CMS, that money needs to stay specific to nursing homes. However, the retention bonus that the nursing homes are paying is not part of the grant monies. So that's not to say that somebody couldn't you know, somebody, but they need to work in a nursing home for 6 months in order to get that bonus, so, yeah.
Oh.
Jen?
That's what.
One of the components of the caregiver program is that it is, there's a media campaign connected with it, right? It's a $250,000 statewide media campaign that's funded as a part of this grant. And what, I'm on the steering committee, and one of the things that we're very concerned about doing is because the Wisconsin Healthcare Association has an assisted living division and our assisted living members, they're facing issues related to the workforce too. And while Laurie's absolutely right that the money connected with this caregiver career program has to be specifically spent, and programs developed through that CMP funding has to be directly connected to advancing the quality of care for skilled nursing facility residents. We're designing the media campaign, I think was very effectively designed so that it would have general applicability across settings for long-term care providers of different types. So, you know, I encourage you to go to the WIS Caregiver Career Program website and, you know, see how they've developed the media campaign in a way that I think will attract people to the profession more generally.
Well, it will, because I'm part of that, it will attract them to the campaign more generally, but again, it's specifically for the
It is.
CNAs. And we want to make sure that, you know, caregivers and PCW workers are starting to be part of that conversation.
Right.
Because it makes it hard for us in the community that we work in, that we're training the people that's in the homes, that we're not able to match, you know, the $15 an hour that they're gonna get coming out of Gateway or MATC to be able to hire them. And we are getting some of those people because they're not going directly to the nursing home, but then they're asking us to pay them $15 an hour, and there's no way possible we'll be able to pay them $15 an hour.
Right. And that's why the provider associations are working together to develop a budget initiative. We ended up getting $60.8 million directly to the long-term care workforce funding, you know, for outside the capitated rate system for MCOs directly to providers, so that providers could increase the wages that are available to the workers in all family care settings. So I mean, it's not specific money in the same way that the $2.3 million for the CMP funded money.
Correct.
But we end up, the nursing homes, we're paid, that's being paid for by ourselves. I mean, those are fines against nursing homes. So facilities are paying those fines, and then that money is being reinvested into the, you know, programs to advance the quality of care. So, I mean, and those fines are high, heavy, and intense.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you know, it's a trade-off here. I don't know if we necessarily want, there are good things and bad things associated with that. We have, I think, some issues with the way fines have been levied in terms of CMPs, but not to sidetrack that, I just want to talk about
Good,
that.
we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions related to allegations?
What was the name of that website again? I didn't get a chance to write it down.
The West Care.
West Care, okay.
With Caregiver Career Program, yeah. And I mean, just to throw a shout out to, I mean, there's a lot of state employees, people are doing a lot of really good work on that. It's a great public-private partnership. Encourage everybody, you know, even if they don't necessarily connect with nursing homes, most people in this room probably have a social media account. You know, not to, I mean, to go back to Brian's presentation. This is okay. You know, like retweet, you know, like, you know, put an announcement out, and encourage people to spread the word about this caregiver program.
Anything else? Again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.